Welcome to this Gnostic correspondence study, class, and practice. We ask for your divided attention, not between life and a variety of tasks, but between you as the subject, the observer, and this as the object. Divide your attention between what you see and sense and feel. This is a class and a practice in sound and symbol to help you connect so that your consciousness may be contacted, attracted, but not distracted. From the point of view of the consciousness, life is less about success or failure. It's about comprehension. And comprehension is the only means by which we may end the battle of the opposites that plague the mind. It is the only way to reconcile or resolve the equation of life without leaving a remainder that continually recurs, eternally reprocessing through existences and persistence in the mind. The light shines from within, but the darkness does not comprehend it. The light is liberated in two ways: transmutation and comprehension. Here we will give valuable keys that with the Gnostic teachings have the power that can liberate us from this mechanical process that we are consumed by. The infinite symbol of the Holy Eight connects the magnetic currents established between the spiritual forces that ascend from the physical reality upwards and the material elements that descend from the spiritual downwards, which combine to create all of the different planes of consciousness that we can perceive. The solar and lunar forces of fire and water rise and fall respectively through the vital channels of the human body, which grant us the capacity to generate or degenerate life. But handled intelligently, we hold the power to regenerate it. Fire renews nature incessantly, infinitely. For the one who wishes to self-realize, there is an eternal battle between light and darkness. This great work has always been depicted as a struggle between these two opposing forces. This battle, or better said, balance between the solar and lunar elements, is not a matter of better or worse, but how we recognize or become identified, and one's ability to extract what is of value, how to apply it in time, place, and proportion. Which brings us to the mind and a common problem. In understanding ancient peoples, places, cultures, and teachings, and for that matter, even understanding ourselves, the way with which consciousness expresses itself and or is expressed through symbols, words, language. This is why it's important for teachers and teachings to rise up within their own environment, culture, time, and space for greater comprehension. For instance, in the East, there are many words for that which we simply call mind, of which its most elementary is manas. This leads to confusion, but fortunately we have the system of the Tree of Life that gives us the possibility of a deeper understanding. essentially what we would say manas, superior manas and inferior manas. The inferior manas, or the inferior mind, is the mental intellectual mind. Superior manas is the mind that does. That is the will, the human will, and beyond that is the consciousness, which is the mind that knows. The word that we have for human, or to abbreviate man, which is often used, comes from the Sanskrit word manas, a possessor of mind. And a human, the word hu means spirit. A humanas is a mind connected with or under the service of the spirit, which is why in Gnosis we say that we're not humans.
The Trinity of the three primary forces, or Christ, comes from the world of pure spirit and is the way, the truth, and the life of the Holy Spirit, breathed intimately into the heavenly man, manifested as the divine self, or Atman. And in this way, we see that the word man is not actually meant to express male, for spirit is androgynous, and this being is our own intimate mother, father. But this mind has even further subdivisions. There's an interior aspect that faces upwards and receives ideas directly from the consciousness, an aspect that looks downwards along with the kama rupa, or vehicle of desires, receiving its information and elaborating concepts based solely on the senses and sensations. And in between, there is an intermediate component that forms beliefs, but they can only be half or partial truths because they are only connected to subjective reality and thus not perceiving life from all possible dimensions.
In essence, and what we're celebrating coming up, this birth of the Christ, to be born in each of us as a child, because we are all children. We're not yet grown-up human beings. The problem is, we believe we are. Just like the child, imagine getting behind the car and says, I can drive, I can work, I can talk, I can have a relationship. But can you? I mean, yes, you can, but don't have the perspective to understand the impact of what we're doing. So becoming a human is part of the path. Now, one of the great obstacles, and why we talk about the two components of transmutation and non-identification, is because we work with these two prime elements that we're going to incorporate in this practice and expand on. We've gotten some questions about it, and it's really vital in more ways than one, and valuable. And we're going to utilize for the mind, the manas, a mantra. We've heard that word before. I mean, yeah, in these times, there's nothing I can say that you haven't heard somewhere, but hopefully we'll accentuate and show, because that word mantra, manas, man, mind, tra is an instrument or a tool. So a mantra is a tool for the mind. So as we're struggling to get through our day, it's great to have a tool, something to utilize to occupy the mind. Otherwise, it becomes preoccupied. Now we're going to incorporate the mantra with the transmutation and the practice that we've already been doing.
We also would like to introduce the mantra Wu, which we will use in the latter part of the practice. And it's a mantra that's very helpful in the quieting of the mind. It's pronounced differently in different vocalizations in meditation, but we're going to use it in its relationship to the pressure of the consciousness, or the force of the spirit, which is associated with the wind or the air, but not as blowing away, but creating a pressure from inside so that impressions will reflect or bounce off this force. It's used as a way of passive negation. It's a common Chinese word. It was adopted in many Eastern traditions, and the English translations are more or less no or not or nothing without. But more appropriately, it's not nothing, it's no thing. And hence can be found in relation to the earliest forms of koan, which are questions that cannot be answered with the intellectual mind. And interestingly, like the pictographic origins of the Chinese characters, in The Gateless Gate, a 13th century collection of Zen koan, they use the word wu in its title, and in relation to the first case koan given, the Chinese Chan calls the word the gate to enlightenment. It's also perceived as pure awareness, or that which is prior to the experience of knowledge or information. And the meaning is used especially by the Chan school of Buddhism, or Zen. The equivalent is mu in Japanese. It's a negative force or a negating force. It is the cause to be non-existent. It represents impossible, lacking reason or cause, non-existence or non-being, not having, a state of lack. It is the original non-being from which being is produced in the Tao Te Ching. And it is a non-dualistic meaning which holds that it's difficult to describe. In the digital world, there's a voltage state for 1 and a voltage state for 0, but that's always incomplete, where Wu would represent the state of the computer not being plugged in at all. It's used to indicate a question whose answer is to either unask the question, indicate that the question is fundamentally flawed, or reject the premise that a dualistic answer could be given. So, a tradition based in the East known as Wu Wei. Wu Wei is about aligning actions with nature and things happening around us. It's not about giving up on life or being lazy, but rather about flowing with life events, being in the free flow of life and incorporating them into our lives. Wu Wei is a Chinese concept that means non-action or effortless action. It's a key idea in Taoism, which is the philosophy that means the way. So in relation to reality or truth, in order to comprehend one's life from moment to moment, in which the mind tries to answer its big questions, and often its little questions, the answer is always Wu. The mind does not, cannot propose solutions. It only presents options, questions to which the answer is always Wu. Thinking is never knowing. That is part of the great illusion that lulls us to sleep and to that pendulum of the rhythm of this or that. We must say, Wu.
And transmutation is more working with the energy. And there are transmutation teachings out there and a lot of techniques, but I want to accentuate and get to something very important. One, it's working with the creative energy, which has the power to generate life. And for Gnosis, it has even a greater power to regenerate life. But it's important to understand my life is not just this body. The teachings have gotten confused. People think, for instance, yoga, it's a spiritual teaching, but really when you go to yoga, it's a lot about the body and the physicality. We have to incorporate and keep the spiritual relationship intact. So this movement of energy of transmutation can be confused with a relationship with the physical body. The physical body is an effect, as someone was talking about, cause and effect. We can only deal with our reality so much relatively by dealing with only the physical, just like with a drug taking the physical element from its intelligence. So when we're doing the practice of transmutation, and I'm going to expand upon this and hopefully give a real practical extended application for the work of transmutation. And the key is thinking beyond the physical. We're dealing with energy, and we think about energy because energy is physical. It is, more or less, but it's vital. It relates to the vital world. If we look at the tree of life, it's the dimension right above. It relates to time. It relates to time directly. And in Hebrew, the word is yesod, or foundation. It is the foundation of the physical, and it's the foundation of everything that is above it. It is the force that equates to the time this physical body will be in the third dimension. That's why it's related to time. Does that make sense? It's the more vitality is the more force, life force we have in this physical world. But when we do the practice, we have to think more than just the physical body. So we're moving the energy up the spine with the inhalation. But let's imagine, not thinking, but just have in our awareness that when we send it down to the heart, it's transforming into another dimension and continuing spiraling outward beyond myself. The effects will be felt in the physical body, but that's what's happening. And the more we open our awareness to something beyond the physical body, the more it's going to start to populate and regenerate these superior vehicles. Now, here's two more elements to apply in this practice. Because in some traditions and teachings, they talk about contracting the pelvic floor or the sphincter, and that's relatively important, relatively obstructive, because if we think completely physically, then we're missing the point. There is an expansion and a contraction, but we want to try to do it with our awareness.
There's more concentration than a contraction.
There will be a little physical reaction, but if we're focused on the physical, again, we're transforming that energetic relationship in a lower octave, keeping it just in the physical body. And counterproductively, we create tension, which then actually obstructs the flow completely. So I'm going to speak for men and women because I'm speaking for all of us, but we have to find for this ourselves. On the inhale, we have to imagine as if our dantian, or our sexual center, which for the male relates to the prostate and the testicles, and the woman, the uterus and the ovaries. I can, in my mind, perceive more or less those two elements for myself. For the woman to perceive your ovaries, it might be a little tricky. But here's where we're using the imagination, right? What we're trying to do is open, expand on the inhalation, because these two channels, Ida and Pingala, go up and come back down. And imagine it's like a straw, right? If you ever put your finger on the top of a straw, it doesn't allow movement. Like the old time, you take the cans, you'd have to poke a hole. You have to poke a hole on the other side so that the airflow, the flow creates a cycle. So by expanding with our awareness, try to do this just right now. Feel as if you're expanding. You are relaxing all of your creative organs and the base of your spine and the muscles all associated with that. But we're feeling in our spatial sense that we're going expanding beyond the physical, just as if you're taking a breath. And this relates directly to your diaphragm, because to open your lungs is to expand your diaphragm. This is the element that really is breathing. The lungs are following the diaphragm that's going in and out. I don't want to get like technical and confusing, but this is something to work with and to learn, because due to life and nature and matter, we've got really identified and complicated, but this is the way we're meant to actually be. So we're trying to get back to the basics. And a little child breathes exactly the way they're supposed to. But in the practice, by feeling that expanse, it opens up and creates a natural flow for the energy to go up and back to its source. So doing that creates 50% of the work that we need to do. And it's a valuable part that most people don't understand. So on the inhale, we're opening. And it seems a little counter-mental, because it's like I feel like I need to push it up, but really we're drawing it down, and its only path comes from up to down. Okay, so we inhale and expand. And then when we get our lungs full, we pause, and then slightly, with the same attention, then we contract. But what it is a subtle holding. And for the man, it's almost as if the testicles are being sealed, drawn up a little bit.
For the woman, that is where that lifting of the pelvic floor comes in. And those are, toning that part of your body in that way helps you to conserve and transmute your energy. So it is an important part of the action, not only in transmutation, but we practice yoga or other types of breathing. It really helps.
So, but let's try to do it subtly. Because the more you do that, because we're talking about energy, spiritual energy, psychic energy, these energies are more subtle. So if we just want to start accustoming ourselves to something more. And really, it's not about, I can't feel it, I don't know it, it's just like, oh, let's look for it. Let's try to do this. Inhale. Then it comes up to the third eye. Pause, relax, slightly contract, send it to the heart. This is the other difference that in Gnosis we teach. It's not this giant orbit from sex to sex. It's from sex to heart. Going back to the point of origin is going to happen. We don't have to worry about that. But we're trying to transmute, which is to transform at a superior octave, the essence into superior dimensions. It happens anyway, or we wouldn't be alive. But the more we accentuate this, the greater impact it has. And it's going to help us, our self-awareness and our consciousness. And we're going to add one more component, which is the mantra. And the mantra on the inhale is hum. Silently. Relax. Slight contraction to the heart. Let go. So you're doing this expansion, contraction, expansion. And then we find a rhythm. And think that on the conclusion, I'm almost like holding the precious energy
right here in my heart. And with these keys, we reveal the synthesis and foundation of the entire alchemical process. Cryosopeia, the mystery of transmuting psychobiological base metals into virtues of gold. And with it, we find ourselves at the threshold of the doorway to the mysteries of the great work. And in the process, we reconcile and regain balance between head, heart, and sex, body, soul, and spirit. This is done through the microbiological laboratories of the glandular system, working in harmony with the psychoenergetic system of the chakras, taught in the ancient East. In this exercise, we work primarily with these three: Ajna, Anahata, and Muladhara. If we were to look into the center of the symbol of the base chakra, Muladhara, we would find a triangle, a mini trinity that represents the uterus and the ovaries for the woman and the testicles and the prostate of the man. In time, we can learn to wisely combine these principles, making it possible to move into superior octaves of the alchemical process, even the creation of the elixir of immortality. But let us begin with this foundational practice.
This practice could be followed along with eyes open to find the rhythm, but eventually, ideally, you will go at your own pace once the key elements are understood and integrated. Now, let's begin with concentration. Relaxation of the physical body. Quiet your mind and open your heart. The purpose of this exercise is to transmute the vital energy from the physical body up to the third eye. Then send it down to the portal of your heart into superior dimensions of consciousness. Let us begin. Expand. Inhale, concentrate, contract, send the energy down to the heart. Pause, expand, inhale, concentrate, contract, pause, expand, inhale, concentrate, contract, continue.
And the key is becoming more and more subtle. We may even forget about the body completely. And with the subtleization, there's an intimacy. And with the intimacy, there's a cherishing, a feeling of loving.
Continue.
It's not to say that there aren't times when we do a more intense pranayama or transmutation, more physically revitalizing, which multiplies the oxygen in the blood, awakens. But very importantly is the interiorization, utilizing this as a means to naturally breathe, but to subtleize and go inside to prepare the mind to go inward. Pause, relax, notice if there's any accumulated tension in the shoulders or the brow or the jaw. Let's imagine that by simply putting our awareness, our attention in the tension, it relaxes. Let's also imagine that without complete intention on this practice, we're still breathing relatively this way. Because this is a practice, yes, but it is practical, meaning the means by which we breathe always should be transmutative. So whenever we think of it during the day in a moment, we can subtly begin to breathe like this. We can even say the mantras internally. Whenever we're confronted with an obstacle, a negative thought, or a negative expression of somebody or someone in a circumstance outside of ourselves, as a reminder to transmute. Because transmutation is engaged through non-identification, transmuting that force, that energy. In this space, and with the body relaxed and the mind relatively quiet, let us establish ourselves in a point at the center of the mind, maintaining relaxation and understanding that this breath and subsequent energy is moving through these semi-physical, semi-etheric channels across this point in the center of our mind, energetically. But we fix our attention now, the central point, and the periphery is in our awareness that this is happening, moving. But in this space, we just look with our imagination that we're looking into the darkness or the light, whatever we perceive. And our attention is concentrated here. Like the breath rises and falls, our attention stays stable. We might notice the pull to one way or another, to up, to down, to outside of us. Keep a tight but gentle grasp on our attention right here in the center of our mind. We might notice tension in the brow of this practice, and when we notice, we let go. And to help with this attention, we're going to introduce a simple mantra. Woo. It has many meanings, but for us, it's as if a negating, like the sound of the wind that pressurizes and blows subtle elements away. Because the elements in our mind, though we magnify them, they're actually very subtle. And as we subtleize, and we can utilize this mantra like the wind, we can say it softly, but definitely mentally. Ooh. Almost like a breath. In this way, we, in essence, pressurize the mind with the consciousness, with the spirit, which is associated with the breath and the wind in all many traditions. The Holy Spirit, Numa, also means the holy breath or wind. So though the mantra is not pushing directly things away, but it's producing the effect that allows mental elements and senses to reflect off of. This affirmative psychological state, affirming our presence with this mantra and the breath. Ooh. If in the relaxation we drift a little bit and a mind becomes active or a thought arises, we catch ourselves thinking off in a distant place or deep inside of our own subconscious, we don't identify with frustration. We don't get upset. We just reintroduce as if we're just raising an arm and waving away the thought.
key is not to push away, but just look away. Remember, whatever thinking or impression or memory comes, it's a dance. Okay, we're drawing the practice to an end, but let's imagine that the practice isn't ending. Let's continue the practice. Ooh. We can use it as a means to keep us from denying our life. And whenever we remember, we can incorporate those two elements of transmuting, Hamsa and Wu.